Okay, just picture this for a second. You've led your people for 40 long years through a harsh wilderness. You're standing at the very edge of a new world, the one you've dreamed of your entire life. But here's the catch: you're not going in. This is the incredibly dramatic setting for the book of Deuteronomy, and it's basically Moses' final, urgent briefing for the nation of Israel.
Right out of the gate, Moses just cuts straight to the heart of the matter. He frames their entire future around this one single monumental choice. This isn't just about following some rules. We're talking about a matter of life and death, of blessing and curse. Wow, this one verse really captures the incredible stakes of his entire farewell address.
So, to really get what he's saying, here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll dive into the setting of Moses' final stand. Then, we'll look at his two main directives. First, remember why, and second, obey how. After that, we'll examine the ultimate choice he puts before them. And finally, we'll see why this message still resonates thousands of years later.
So, let's set the scene. We're on the plains of Moab, just east of the Jordan River. The entire generation that escaped slavery back in Egypt, they've all passed away in the desert. Now, it's their kids who are ready to inherit the promised land. But their leader, Moses, the guy who has been with them through absolutely everything, he's been told he won't be crossing that river with them. This is it. This is his last chance to get them ready.
You know, the name of the book itself, Deuteronomy, actually gives us a big clue. It's from the Greek for second law, but that's a little misleading. Moses isn't handing down a bunch of new legislation here. What he's doing is taking the law they already have and just passionately explaining its meaning, its purpose, its very heart, to a generation that didn't experience the Exodus firsthand. It's all about making it personal. And that brings us to Moses' first big directive, which is actually pretty simple, but also really profound. You have to look back before you can move forward. He knows, deep down, that if they forget their history, they are absolutely doomed to repeat its failures.
This timeline, it tells such a powerful story. The journey from Egypt to the Promised Land should not have taken 40 years. But at a place called Kadesh Barnea, the first generation's fear and their unbelief led to this massive, tragic failure. Those 40 years of wandering, that was the direct result. Moses is basically saying, look what disobedience cost your parents. Please, don't make the same mistake.
But the story isn't just about failure. Not at all. Moses also reminds them of the other side of the coin, that through all of their rebellion, all their wandering, God never, ever abandoned them. He carried them, just like a father carries his son, with tenderness and strength. This contrast is so important. Their unfaithfulness was met with God's unwavering faithfulness.
So, when you boil it all down, Moses is teaching them that their memory is their most important tool. By remembering both their own failures and God's constant mercy, they can build a future on wisdom instead of just repeating that same old cycle of rebellion.
Okay, so if the first directive was all about why they should be faithful, the second one is all about how. And Moses is about to totally redefine what obedience even means. It's not about checklists and rituals, he says. It's about relationship. Right at the very heart of this whole section is something called the Shema. This becomes the central prayer in all of Judaism. It kicks off with this declaration of who God is, the one and only Lord. And then, immediately, it's followed by a command to love him with everything you've got. Your heart, your soul, your strength. All of it.
This comparison really nails the shift Moses is calling for. He's trying to steer them away from just plain legalism, a faith that's based on fear, just following rules and going through empty motions. Instead, he's calling them to devotion, a faith that's actually defined by love, by a real relationship with God, which then just naturally overflows into justice and mercy for other people.
And hey, this wasn't just some abstract idea. The law was designed to shape every single corner of their society. This stuff wasn't just for the Sabbath. It governed how they did business, how leaders were supposed to act, how they cared for the poor and vulnerable, and how they structured their families. Faith was meant to be a 24/7 lived-in reality. And now we get to the dramatic climax of Moses' entire speech. After reminding them of their past and re-explaining the law, he just lays it all out on the table. Two potential futures, two very different paths they can choose to walk. The choice just could not be more stark. One path, the one of loving obedience, well, that leads to blessing, a flourishing community living in peace and security. But the other path, the one of disobedience and forgetting God, that leads to a curse, a slow decay that ends in hardship and ultimately exile from the very land they're about to enter. Moses is just being brutally honest about the real-world consequences of their choices. So how do they stay on that path of blessing? Moses says it takes something much deeper than just following the rules. Circumcise your hearts, he tells them. What he's saying is that true obedience isn't about what you do on the outside, it's about an internal transformation. It requires a new heart, one that is soft and responsive to God.
And that's where Moses' story ends. He sees the promised land from a distance, and then he dies. But the influence of his final words? Oh, that doesn't end there at all. In fact, Deuteronomy becomes one of the most important books for understanding the rest of the story, especially when we look at the life of Jesus.
This legacy becomes crystal clear during this one fascinating moment in Jesus' life. When he's tempted out in the wilderness, which is a clear echo of Israel's 40 years of wandering, how does he respond? He quotes Scripture. And get this, every single one of his responses is a direct quote from the book of Deuteronomy. He actually uses Moses' words as his defense.
So the ultimate point here is that Jesus is presented as the one who finally fulfills the call of Deuteronomy. He's the one who truly loves God with all his heart, soul, and strength. He perfectly lives out that obedience that flows from love, succeeding right where the nation of Israel had failed.
And that brings us all the way back to the central challenge of the entire book. Moses stood on the plains of Moab and laid a choice before a nation. I have set before you life and death. Now choose life. The enduring power of Deuteronomy is that it takes that ancient challenge and it places it directly before every single person who reads it, leaving us all with the same timeless question. What will you choose?
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us.